Hello, everyone. At this point, we've talked about carbohydrates and lipids a little bit. And remember, these are part of the four major macromolecules of biology that we're looking at. And then today, we're going to talk about proteins pretty well. They're so important that we kind of give them a little more attention, and specifically types of proteins, which are enzymes. So we'll get into those. But just like with all the other macromolecules, right, the big organic molecules of biology, they are made of smaller parts, right, monomers, and even smaller than that, atoms, elements. And so in the case of proteins, they are carbon, hydrogen, nitrogen, and oxygen. So remember, up to this point, we've had mostly stuff with carbon and hydrogen and oxygen in it. And now we've added nitrogen. So a very important component elementally of proteins is nitrogen. Okay, so the functions here are, I don't want to say endless, but they're not all well understood even. There's so many different functions for proteins. But amongst them are that they regulate cell processes, and we'll talk about that more when we get into photosynthesis and cellular respiration. They control rates of reactions, that's mostly enzymes. They form important cell structures, transport information. You can read the rest of it. They act as antibodies that do incredibly important things. Okay, but proteins are made of amino acids, and there are 20 amino acids, right? And they get constructed, put together into different forms, right? Again, think Lego pieces to make bigger, more complex structures. Just like the alphabet has, right, 26 letters in it, and we can make almost endless numbers of words with those 26 letters, these 20 amino acids can be put together, strung together in many different ways to make almost endless different types of proteins. So very important, very complex molecules. Okay, so the three major types that are in living things are enzymes, and again, we're going to focus more on those later, but these are very important for catalyzing or helping to make efficient chemical reactions that take place inside of cells. Structural proteins, just like they sound like, right, these do the job of sort of being the skeleton of the cell. And then finally, signaling proteins, again, sort of in the name, work to do relaying of information within organisms. Okay, so enzymes specifically, because they're so important, right? Going to give them their whole own page here. The body, right, our metabolism and other body processes are chemical reactions, right? There's a lot of chemical reactions taking place. But these chemical reactions, if we were just to wait around for them to happen spontaneously, they wouldn't happen fast enough. They wouldn't happen at a rate that would keep us healthy. So our cells produce enzymes, which are these big protein molecules that have the capacity to help speed along chemical reactions taking place inside of our bodies. And they do that by lowering something called activation energy. So if you think about having a campfire, right, with your family in the evening, what are the things you need for that to happen, right? Well, you need fuel, right? Usually wood. You need air, right? Some sort of oxygen coming to the fire, and you need a spark. Well, if you think about it, the fuel, right, isn't just going to start combusting, right? It isn't just going to take off and start burning. You need to add some energy to it first, right? So you might put your lighter down there next to the kindling or the wood, this thing that you're trying to get burning. Once it gets going, right, now it is going through the combustion reaction on its own. Now it's perpetuating itself, but it took you adding some energy to make that happen, that combustion reaction. And that's the activation energy, right? So the energy required to get a reaction started is the activation energy. And enzymes work by lowering the amount of energy needed to get a reaction started, by lowering that amount of activation energy, thus making the reaction start faster. We'll talk about how they do that. So enzymes do this structurally by providing a space for reactants in a chemical reaction to align up with the enzyme, and they help speed that reaction along, whether it's a reaction to break things down or it's a reaction to put things together. That active site on the enzyme helps to make that reaction happen. And there's ways that that's understood. There's a lot of concepts there, but for our purposes, we just need to understand that enzymes help to speed reactions along by lowering their activation energy. So hopefully you got a chance to go through this enzyme cartoon with the Amoeba Sisters. Pretty cool, but it gives you sort of the imagery, right? So enzymes are kind of like the Pac-Man. They're large molecules because they're large proteins. They have an active site where different substrates or reactants can hook onto them. But the interesting thing about them is that after they carry out their reaction, right, they break a bond or they make a bond, they can be reused again over and over again. I like to think of it as sort of like a wrench or a screwdriver, right? I mean, I can use my screwdriver and it doesn't get used up, right? I can use my wrench and it doesn't get used up when I use it. I can use it again and again, and it can do a job over and over again. Now, if I take that same wrench or screwdriver and I bend it or melt it, it doesn't work as well. So this is the same thing that can happen to enzymes. They can be denatured or destroyed by certain things in nature. Big changes in pH, right? Acidity or basicity can impact them dramatically, their functionality, how well they work, and big changes in temperature. So one of the problems with getting a fever, right, at too high a fever, is that it can actually impact the functionality of the enzymes you need to fight the disease, right? The bacteria, the whatever that's bothering you. And so enzymes can be a little bit touchy, right? A little bit temperamental, but in the perfect conditions, they make us thrive, right, as organisms. Okay, finally, you looked at an enzyme named lactase. So hopefully you've recognized that ACE at the end of a word means enzyme. OS, hopefully you remember, means sugar, right? So lactase is actually the enzyme that breaks down the sugar lactose, right? Certain people in adulthood don't have the capacity to make lactase anymore. Their cells don't have the machinery in place, or they don't have the blueprints in place to make this enzyme. So that's problematic. When you drink milk and you're getting lactose, the sugar that comes with milk, it sits in your gut, right, in your intestines, and it doesn't break down properly. And if it doesn't break down properly because the lactase isn't there to help break it down, it starts to ferment. It starts to be fed to certain bacteria that give off gas, and it makes you bloated, makes you very uncomfortable. So lactase is the enzyme that helps speed along the breakdown of lactose, which is made up of two monomers, glucose and galactose, in your small intestine. But as we age, sometimes we lose the ability to continue making the lactase enzyme. Some people just are born without it, right? Big portions of the population are born without it. And that's a problem. But as we talked about, lactase, like any other enzyme, can be impacted. So here's a little show of how lactase, the enzyme, can be impacted by pH. You can see it works optimally here at pH 7, kind of neutral pH, but its functionality drops way off down here and down here. So even if you have lactase, right, if there's the wrong conditions in your gut, pH gets out of whack, you can limit the functionality of that enzyme lactase. So there you have it, proteins, right? These very large macromolecules made of carbon, hydrogen, nitrogen, and oxygen, right? Built furthermore of the amino acids, right? The monomer amino acids, right, are strung together. And then the most important type, arguably of proteins, are the enzymes. All right, take care, and we'll see you soon.